This is Brian Dohn, FoxSportsNext, Scout.com, and we're breaking down a 2012 ACC recruiting class. You got to start with Florida State and what Jimbo Fisher and his coaching staff did down in Tallahassee. To me, you start off with Ronald Darby, the nation's #1 cornerback. He was committed to Notre Dame for a long time. Last month, he decides to waiver. He's looking other places. He winds up at Florida State. Elite track speed, great body, great frame to play cornerback. To me, it starts off there. You also get Eddie Goldman, big-time defensive lineman out of Washington, D.C. You get Jameis Winston, a quarterback who, I can't wait to play. I just hope I get to see him on the football field instead of the baseball field because he is an accomplished baseball player as well. Then when I look at Miami, just amazing what Al Golden decided to do down there. Signs 33 kids. Half dozen or so wind up enrolling in January, kind of ease that burden to the 25 limit that you get, NCAA limit with scholarships. But all he did down there was he wanted to replenish depth, and he did that. You're looking at somebody, he took 6 cornerbacks, 6 defensive linemen, 5 receivers, 3 quarterbacks. It's all about replenishing talent, building depth down there. That's what you really need down at Miami. There's plenty of talent down there. He's on his way to doing that. I also look at something like Clemson. Clemson did a great job. They get Carlos Watkins. They get Travis Blanks. They get Zach Brooks. Really, really good players that should be able to help out quickly at Clemson. And then another storyline for me is Maryland and what they were able to do at the end. They didn't have the stellar class. They're not filled with 5 stars and all that stuff. But in the last month, they wound up getting 2 running backs, Albert Reed and Wes Brown, both out of the D.C. area, tremendous players. They also wind up and get Stephon Diggs about a week after signing day. Again, tremendous talent, 5-star player. Give a lot of credit to Coach Randy Edsall for hiring Mike Loxley, bringing him on staff. He really was the guy who brought in a lot of these kids at the end. I think that only bodes well for how D.C. and that area in Maryland and Baltimore, which is rich in talent, just how they'll think of Maryland in the future. I think that's huge. But for me, when I look at the best classes, to me, Florida State stands out because of all the talent they have. 3.95 stars per player, which if you look at it per player, is the best ranking in the nation. And I look at Miami because when you bring in that many players, your feeling is you're going to replenish the talent. And yes, they did have a few reaches on that, but the idea was to bring in as much talent as possible and kind of cycle it through, and that's kind of how you rebuild the talent down there. When I look at the biggest storylines when it comes to positions, I look at running back, and I look at what happened down at Maryland. You get Wes Brown and Albert Reed committing within days of each other. Tremendous players. Both should have the ability to come in and impact Maryland quickly. I expect both of them to be able to play coming up in 2012, which is huge for them. And I also look at, back down to Miami, Duke Johnson. Look, you never know how a kid's going to respond to living away from home for the first time. You go into classes and you kind of have some freedom. You want a kid to be able to be focused. I think Duke Johnson can be that kid. I think his talents on the field speak for themselves. If he gets everything settled, I think he can just have an incredible impact on the Miami Hurricanes down there just in 2012 and what he can bring to that program. When I'm looking at biggest surprises in the 2012 class, I have to look at Stephon Diggs. To me, I never thought he was going to wind up at Maryland until maybe the last few weeks before his, before he made his announcement. I always heard Ohio State. There was talk of Auburn. There was talk of Florida. And then all of a sudden, Maryland comes in last month. And I think part of it is Wes Brown and Albert Reed going there. And all of a sudden, you feel something happening in that area. Stephon wanted to be a part of it. And I also think he's a kid. Look, he'll go in as a receiver. He can play there right away. I think he can play cornerback and be sensational there. He can work in the return game. I just think there's too many areas for him to be successful that he's not going to see the field a lot as a freshman. And when I'm looking ahead to 2013, the thing that jumps out to me early on in the process is what Florida State's doing. Florida State has more than a half dozen commitments. They're all Florida kids. I don't want to say kids are lining up to go to Florida State, but there's a lot of excitement down there on what's going on with Jimbo Fisher. And, when you're getting kids early in the process, it means you're getting kids you choose and being your elite kids on your board. And that's exactly what Florida State is doing.